Just a reminder for anyone that's just joined and you're wondering who these other two people are from the A.D.K channel. We have Dave from Lowdown, and we of course have Alan from Before the Sirens. Next question. I find this one's an interesting one. How many songs should a band play from a new album on the promotional tour that they go on? And the concept in my head here is, obviously, if it's your first album, you're going to play the whole album pretty much. But if you're someone like Metallica, they've just released a new album, 72 Seasons. So how many of those songs would you expect to be played at a Metallica concert? Okay, no one wants to get in on that one. Andy,
I'll go. So, and I'll give you a kind of a case study, if you will, a story behind it. I think that obviously, as you say, if you have one album and it is that album, then you're going to play all of it, right? So that's kind of like, you know, like us as Before the Sirens. Like, we've got an EP coming out later this year. That's a plug. Didn't mean to, but never mind. And we will play that almost every show you see us, because it's the body of our work, right? But we a couple of us went to see Sleep Token a few months ago now, and was really into their sort of back catalogue, and never seen them live before. Now it's a difficult watch because they have they don't speak, because they wear masks and they're trying to hide their identities. They don't talk, so it's a bit of a tough watch. There's no sort of on stage charm, because can't. I mean, they're excellent live, and like vocally, they have loads of energy on stage. And I mean, as I say, his vocals are fantastic, and they were tight as anything. But what they did in the run up, so we saw them at the first date they did in the UK, and in the run up to that, they released two songs, of which I now forgot the name. The first two singles, they did one a day for like 7 days or something silly. So the first two, one of them was called Chokehold, and the other one, the name has escaped me. But anyway, they'd released those two before that show. But what they did was their set comprised of all 7, 5 of which weren't even out yet. So you can imagine the middle of that set, they did 2 of their more popular back catalogue ones at the end, but the 5 in the middle, no one had ever heard before. So they could have been playing anything. There was nothing to catch you. It wasn't involving as such, because usually, like as a gig goer, particularly if it's a band you're really into, part of the thrill is like singing along and knowing that the heavy bit's coming, or knowing that the big chorus is coming, or, you know, getting into the bit you know is coming, and you get excited about that. So from a new album, they could have, like, for that gig, they could have got away and did play those first 2 singles, but they played them at the very, very start. So everybody went mental for 2 songs, and then for 5 songs, the crowd noise of people talking was louder than the band, because people were like, I don't understand what's going on here, because they were quite subdued in sort of, I don't know if you've heard any of their later releases, but they're almost R&B. It's quite down, like sort of the energy comes down a little bit, and it's more sort of mellow, and it really kind of sucked the energy out of the room. At later shows, they may have got away with that, but I suppose my point is that if you have a brand new album out, it's been out a matter of days, and people haven't managed to pick up on the lyrics and kind of get the melodies in their head and sing along, then you need to be relatively careful on, you play it all by all means, but be careful where you place it, because you need to keep that kind of, you know, like for example, if Killswitch brought out a new album, they're not going to play all of that album in the middle and then finish with like The End of Heartache, or, you know, My Last Serenade. They're going to smatter it around. So you can do as you please, depending on how long you're playing for. But I suppose what I'm getting at is that if you say you've written 4 new songs in between your last gig and today, you wouldn't put them all into one set, because no one's going to get into it, or like, unless they've seen you for the first time, in which case it doesn't matter. But your fans that have seen you before aren't going to have anything to kind of hold on to, and in some ways, I think that approach is a touch selfish. Dare I say? But I think ultimately, I think you can play as many songs from a new album as you like, as long as you kind of are respectful to the fan base that have come to see you, in that it's not all in one lump, and you don't kind of self-indulge. That's my point.
So I'm just going to give you a couple of comments that we've had come through. So James from Millstone says you should do the singles plus one extra from the album if you're feeling spicy. Ant from Lowdown says you do 3, 1 at the early part, 1 around the middle, and 1 at the end to break it up. A Stranger says around 50% of your set should be new material. So that's the general gist. So depending on the length of, I mean, if you're a smaller band and you're doing maybe 8 songs in a set, so 4 songs, and it feels kind of that's what generally everyone's sort of saying. You put your singles out, anything that you've basically released ahead of time that's not on the album, you put out there, maybe 1 extra if you see it. But I get that makes sense. I mean, I kind of think like the reason I bring up the Metallica one is I really don't want to hear Enter Sandman ever again live. I couldn't give a crap about that song. It's such a boring song. Sad but true. It's so boring.
Hey!
It's just that I'd much rather hear some of the other stuff. I'd like to hear songs they don't normally play or new material or something like that to show it's more interesting.
Okay,
especially
but then,
I've seen them many times before. But I think I suppose if it's your first time to see them, then you don't want to hear the classics. But
not to cut across you there, Dave. Sorry, but if you've paid your however much it is for a goddamn ticket these days, which I suppose should be another question on a one of these live streams later on, is how much gig tickets are. But if you've paid your £100 to go and see Metallica, you can be damn sure, even though it's been overly popularised again, obviously with the Stranger Things effect and everything else, you would want to see Master of Puppets, right?
Definitely.
It's got to be in the set list.
The thing is, you know there's going to be songs that have got. There's always the songs that have got to be in there, so you know that they're always going to have, as you said, Master of Puppets. You know, Enter Sandman's got to be in there somewhere. So you can almost go through and pick the set. Okay, anyone else got any viewpoints on it? I think Alan's made a pretty much a solid case there. Dave,
sorry.
Yeah, I do think that, and actually in the comment, that's very similar to what I was going to say. I think it depends, 1, how long your set is, 2, how you're known at that gig specifically, and 3, it depends how you set the actual set up, like the set of songs. Because from my standpoint, I do it in sets of almost beginning, a middle, and an end. Because not everyone wants to hear you talk before every fucking song. No one wants that. You know, you want to be able to blend in from one song to another. You want to make it look flawless. And then maybe do the new song after you start talking, because then you can introduce it. Then you can say, this is our new track from so-and-so. We've got a video out. We've got this, we've got that. Then you'd flow into maybe another song. And then maybe you'd talk about another song. So I'd probably say 1 closer to the early part of the set, 1 towards the middle, and 1 maybe towards the end. So I'd probably say maybe 3, maybe. I think it depends when you released it, depends the timing, depends what kind of PR you've been doing, depends what kind of social media pushes. But yeah, I'd probably agree with Ant, to be perfectly honest.
Can I just come in on the angle that Alan mentioned, because it's such a difficult question to answer, and let's get Andy's thoughts on this as well. 2 examples. When a band falls out of love with the genre that they're playing. In fact, I'll give you 3 examples. Who remembers Paradise Lost in the early 2000s, where they just stopped playing metal, they all cut their hair, they were wearing designer gear, and they tried to be Depeche Mode. And I saw them twice around that era, and they would not play any of the early songs. It's like they were ashamed of them, you know, like with the growl vocals, and they didn't want to be associated with that extreme metal origin where they come from. And now they've gone full circle and they're one of the best bands in the world again. And then the other one, he remembers Billy Corgan saying in the late 90s, rock is dead. And then they lost Jimmy Chamberlain, their drummer, and they didn't play hardly any songs from Siamese Dream or Melancholy Infinite Sadness on that 1998 tour. And that is scandalous. It's almost like, we're even better now that we've left that genre of music behind. So we're just going to play our album in its entirety. The irony is it's a great album, adore. And then the third example, not many people remember the Manic Street Preachers were a heavy rock band, the first 3 albums. And that last album before Richie Edwards disappeared, The Holy Bible, probably the best lyrical album I've got in my collection. And then they turned into almost like a middle of the road dad rock band. And again, James Dean Bradfield, surprisingly a top guitar player, and he just fell out of love with the instrument. And then you go and watch them, and yeah, you'd get Motorcycle Emptiness and You Lovers and a few songs like that, but they would just play probably 60-70% of songs from the the current #1 album. So I think it's when bands are stubborn like that, it might be because they've fallen out of love with the genre and they're ashamed of what their early stuff is, even though a lot of fans are there to watch it. Or it could be stubbornness, as in every record we put out is better than the last one, and we're going to prove it to you. And we don't care if your opinion is that, no, it's not. We want to hear the classics. So it can be, it can also come from a bad place, that, that attitude of playing everything from the current album.
Okay. Any other thoughts from that? Andy, did you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, I've got a recent example. I don't go to many big gigs. Last one being Obituary in February. They've got a new album out that we reviewed on the channel, Dying of Everything. And I was surprised how much of an around an hour long set they played from that album. Probably 6 songs from the new album. And this is a band who's got 30 years of material to choose from. There's lots of fan favourites, which they did play as well. But I just, going into that show, I was expecting perhaps, 3 or 4 from the new album, but it's more like 6. But it's a great show because it was an album I was familiar with, which contrasts the only time I've seen My Dying Bride on the, I think, For Lies I Sow was being toured, and I wasn't familiar with that album at all, and I was disappointed with how much of that they played, only because I wasn't familiar with it. So like I think what Alan said, you want to go there and you want to listen out for and expect to know when the big chorus is coming, when the big guitar solos come in. You want to know the material. I certainly enjoy bands live that I know the material. Many a time I've seen a band for the one and only time I've come away thinking, oh yeah, I love these guys, and you think, I wish I knew their material before I stepped through the door. Do you know what I mean? That whole experience would have been so much better. But in answer to the sort of the questions on the table, I think it needs to be a sort of a pretty even mix. Like I think you said, Dave. Maybe 1 or 2 at the beginning. Break up the set into sections, spread the new material out throughout the set. Don't, as you said, Alan, don't do like a 5-song indulgent part right in the middle where people are lost thinking, oh, I don't know this stuff.
Okay. I mean, one thing I'd pick up now from what I think, Alan, you mentioned, or actually you've all kind of mentioned in some way or another, which is when you're going to these gigs and they're doing the promotional tour for the new album that's just come out, and they're playing stuff, and one of the biggest problems is people aren't familiar with the new album, they've not had a chance to get the album. But I guess now in these day and ages, with the fact of streaming, the album's there, it's on the stream, you've got access to it straight away. You're not having to wait for the to get the CD or buy the CD. You just go onto your streaming platform, Spotify, the album's there, bam, off you go, start listening to it. So that's one of the reasons bands will probably start throwing more tracks in, because they know that if you're a fan of the band, you're going to the concert, you're more than likely would have gone on to Spotify and listened to that album before you've gone. But I know back in the day, I would have gone and seen bands that I hadn't had a chance to buy the album, because I'd have to wait to get the money to go to this R Price or HMV or one of those places. R Price, you've got to remember that place.
Woolworths, mate. That's where it's at. Woolworths.
Yeah. Woolworths, yes, and buy the albums, which you can't do it.
Pick and mix. Yeah,
I love that pick and mix.
I remember buying a Placebo album from Woolworths.
Was that a mistake or?
Yeah.
No, I've still got it in my collection. No, it's a good album. Without You, I'm Nothing.
What Pantera, you got a Placebo. Okay, yeah, good thoughts on that one.